Deep in the high desert of the American Southwest, a persistent shadow hangs over a landscape famous for its stark, sweeping beauty. It is not a visual anomaly, but rather an inescapable droning vibration that seems to emanate from the very air itself. For decades, a small fraction of residents in a historic artisan community have been plagued by an omnipresent noise, often compared to the distant idling of a heavy diesel engine. This phantom drone offers no reprieve, echoing through the quietest hours of the night and vibrating through the walls of homes. It is a phenomenon that forces a profound questioning of human perception, demanding to know what happens when a community hears a sound that the physical world refuses to acknowledge. The experience of this auditory intrusion is overwhelmingly physical, often described as a throbbing pressure felt just as much in the chest as it is heard in the ears. Victims report sleep deprivation, chronic headaches, and a creeping sense of isolation as the noise penetrates earplugs and soundproofing with terrifying ease. It is a classic low-frequency sound, hovering at the very edge of human hearing thresholds, typically estimated between 30 and 80 hertz. Yet when sufferers step outside or drive miles away from their homes, the oppressive vibration often vanishes, only to return the moment they step back indoors. The epicenter of this modern puzzle crystallized in the early 1990s within the borders of Taos, New Mexico. Long celebrated as a haven for artists and spiritual seekers, the town suddenly found itself at the heart of an unprecedented public health enigma. Citizens began petitioning local representatives, desperate for relief from the relentless mechanical drone that was fracturing their daily lives. The sheer volume of complaints transformed a scattered collection of personal grievances into a unified demand for serious investigation. Congress eventually intervened, directing federal resources to uncover the source of the acoustic torment gripping the region. A formal investigative team was assembled, bringing together researchers from the University of New Mexico, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the Sandia National Laboratory. Their mandate was clear: deploy the most advanced acoustic technology available to isolate, measure, and identify the origin of the disturbance. Scientists arrived in the desert with highly sensitive microphones, spectrum analyzers, and seismic sensors, fully expecting to pinpoint an industrial fan, a distant mining operation, or a high-voltage power line. The rigorous scientific measurement of the environment was intended to swiftly demystify the claims and restore quiet to the distressed town. The equipment was positioned inside and around the homes of the most severely affected residents, recording continuously to capture any trace of the elusive vibration. Analysts pored over the resulting data, searching for the telltale spikes in the low-frequency spectrum that would validate the widespread complaints. They cross-referenced their findings with local industrial schedules, flight paths, and even distant geological tremors. Every conceivable external acoustic source was mapped, measured, and meticulously analyzed against the precise times the residents reported hearing the noise. The results of this exhaustive acoustic survey were utterly confounding. The sophisticated instruments, capable of detecting the faintest whispers of atmospheric pressure changes, recorded absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. There was no continuous low-frequency signal, no hidden industrial machinery, and no localized seismic activity matching the descriptions provided by the sufferers. The objective data stood in stark, irreconcilable contrast to the subjective experience of the residents, creating a profound scientific paradox. The Taos Hum was entirely real to those who heard it, yet completely invisible to the machines designed to capture it. This glaring discrepancy forced researchers to shift their focus from external acoustics to the complex field of psychoacoustics, which examines the intricate relationship between physical sound waves and the psychological perception of hearing. If the environment was silent, the phenomenon had to be originating within the intricate biological architecture of the listeners themselves. Medical professionals began evaluating the affected individuals, searching for physiological explanations for the phantom noise. The investigation pivoted from hunting a physical machine in the desert to exploring the microscopic mechanics of the human inner ear and the auditory cortex. The immediate assumption was widespread tinnitus, a common condition where damage to the auditory system causes a continuous ringing or buzzing sensation. However, comprehensive audiometric testing quickly dismantled this theory. The individuals hearing the drone did not exhibit the typical hearing loss associated with tinnitus, and the sound they described did not match the high-pitched internal ringing characteristic of the disorder. Furthermore, tinnitus cannot be blocked by moving to a different geographical location, a strange hallmark reported by many of the New Mexico sufferers. The implications of these findings rippled far beyond the medical clinics, creating a deep fracture within the local population. A stark divide emerged between the 2.5% of residents who were tortured by the sound and the vast majority who experienced only the tranquil silence of the high desert. Skepticism flourished, with some dismissing the sufferers as victims of mass hysteria or psychosomatic illness. The inability to produce a measurable source transformed a shared environmental concern into a deeply isolating personal burden, altering the social fabric of the once unified community. Desperate for a physical explanation, alternative theories began to gain traction among both the public and independent researchers. One prominent hypothesis suggested that the hum was not an acoustic sound wave at all, but rather the human perception of very low-frequency electromagnetic radiation. The military regularly utilized powerful radio waves to communicate with submerged submarines across vast global distances. Proponents of this theory argued that certain individuals might possess a rare biological sensitivity, allowing their nervous systems to translate these massive electromagnetic waves into a perceived auditory drone. Historical precedents exist for the human body acting as a crude radio receiver, a concept documented in early broadcast history when people reported hearing radio stations through dental fillings. The military's communication grids indeed crisscrossed the continent, pulsing with immense energy. Researchers attempted to correlate the operational schedules of these transmission facilities with the onset of the complaints in the Southwest. Shielding experiments were proposed, aiming to place sufferers in Faraday cages to see if blocking electromagnetic fields would silence the relentless intrusion. Yet, the electromagnetic hypothesis struggled to explain the highly localized nature of the most severe complaints. If global military transmissions were the culprit, the hum should have been reported uniformly across vast geographic regions, not clustered in specific valleys or neighborhoods. This inconsistency pointed back to a deeply localized yet entirely imperceptible environmental trigger interacting with a unique human vulnerability. The mystery deepened, suggesting a phenomenon that required a perfect, unknown alignment of external conditions and internal biology. Attention turned toward a fascinating and relatively obscure biological mechanism known as otoacoustic emissions. In a quiet environment, the human ear is not merely a passive receiver of sound, but can actually generate its own faint, low-frequency noises. The hair cells within the cochlea sometimes produce continuous acoustic energy, a byproduct of the ear's internal amplification system. Scientists theorize that in exceptionally quiet, rural environments, certain individuals might simply be hearing the mechanical operations of their own auditory systems amplified by the surrounding silence. While otoacoustic emissions are verified biological reality, they failed to account for the specific behavioral characteristics of the anomaly. Sufferers frequently reported that the sound possessed a distinct directional quality seeming to emanate from a specific corner of a room or a particular patch of sky. Internal ear noise lacks this spatial dimension, existing uniformly within the head. Additionally, the sheer perceived volume of the drone, often loud enough to mask conversational speech, far exceeded the microscopic decibel levels produced by the cochlea's hair cells. The enigma of the high desert was soon recognized as part of a much larger global pattern. Archival research and international reports revealed that this was not an isolated incident. Similar localized drones had been documented for decades, from the infamous Bristol hum in the United Kingdom during the 1970s to the Kokomo hum in Indiana. In each location, a tiny fraction of the population reported identical symptoms, including a low-frequency diesel engine sound, physical vibration, and a total lack of corroborating acoustic evidence. The New Mexico puzzle was merely the most famous manifestation of a worldwide auditory ghost. Geophysicists offered a planetary scale perspective, introducing the concept of microseisms. The Earth's crust is in a state of constant, subtle vibration, primarily driven by the relentless pounding of ocean waves against the continental shelves. These immense oceanic forces generate deep, low-frequency seismic waves that travel through the bedrock across the entire globe. Some researchers propose that geological formations beneath specific towns might act as massive acoustic amplifiers, converting these planetary vibrations into airborne sound waves trapped within the local topography. The microseism theory was elegant, connecting the depths of the ocean to the high-altitude deserts. However, when seismologists measured the actual amplitude of these crustal vibrations, the energy levels were infinitesimally small. To generate an acoustic sound wave powerful enough to rattle windows and cause physical pain, the seismic activity would have to be magnitude stronger, easily detectable by even the most basic earthquake monitoring equipment. The math simply did not align, leaving the planetary vibration theory as an intriguing but ultimately insufficient explanation. A more controversial avenue of inquiry emerged from the fringes of biophysics, focusing on the microwave auditory effect. Discovered during the mid-20th century, this effect occurs when pulsed radio frequencies are absorbed by the tissues of the human head. The rapid thermal expansion of the brain tissue creates a tiny acoustic pressure wave, which travels through the skull directly to the inner ear. The subject perceives this as a click, a buzz, or a hum, despite the complete absence of actual sound waves in the air. Laboratory experiments had long confirmed that microwaves could induce these phantom sounds in human subjects. As modern infrastructure rapidly expanded, blanketing the globe in complex webs of cellular, radio, and radar transmissions, the electromagnetic environment grew infinitely more dense. Investigators mapped local transmission towers and radar installations, searching for overlapping fields of pulsed energy that might be inadvertently turning the skulls of sensitive individuals into biological speakers. The implications of the microwave auditory effect were profoundly unsettling. If true, it meant the sufferers were not imagining things, nor were they hearing a traditional sound. They were experiencing a physical violation of their sensory space by invisible energy fields. It suggested a modern world where the proliferation of technology was creating unforeseen biological consequences, manifesting as a torturous, inescapable drone for those genetically or physiologically predisposed to detect it. The inability to escape the noise became a terrifying testament to an increasingly electrified planet. Ultimately, investigating this auditory phenomenon forces a confrontation with the very limits of objective science. The scientific method relies fundamentally on observation, measurement, and repeatability. When a phenomenon defies objective capture, slipping through the nets of sensitive microphones and spectrum analyzers, science struggles to validate it. The persistence of the worldwide drone challenges the assumption that reality is only that which can be recorded by a machine, highlighting a vast, uncharted territory where human perception and physical reality mysteriously diverge. Psychologists who have studied the victims note the profound trauma inflicted by this epistemological gap. To experience a continuous disruptive sensory input that authorities, neighbors, and instruments insist does not exist is a uniquely modern form of psychological torment. Sufferers are forced to question their own sanity, navigating a reality that has fundamentally split from the consensus world. The lack of validation is often described as being worse than the noise itself, a silent secondary trauma layered over the relentless auditory assault. The original investigation by the University of New Mexico concluded without a definitive answer, leaving the community exactly where it began. Decades later, the low-frequency sound continues to haunt the high desert, an enduring puzzle that resists all attempts at categorization. Is it a complex interaction of electromagnetic fields and human biology, a hypersensitivity to the Earth's own geological heartbeat, or an entirely undiscovered mechanism of human hearing that we simply lack the tools to measure? The Taos Hum remains one of the most compelling psychoacoustic enigmas of our time. It stands as a powerful reminder that our understanding of the sensory universe is still remarkably incomplete. In the quietest corners of the world, where the machinery of civilization fades away, there are still forces that can reach out and touch us, vibrating through the dark. It is a mystery that echoes in the space between the mind and the physical world, a phantom note played on an invisible instrument, waiting for science to finally learn how to listen.